Hi, my name is Greg Cochran, and I'm the Executive Vice President for Pilko and Associates. Today I'm joined by Ed Rule. Ed is a very good friend of mine, but he's also been a work associate of mine for many years. Ed's background is that he has over 36 years of service in manufacturing, chemical manufacturing, energy, automotive industry. Ed is an environmental health and safety expert, and he has worked for many different industries, applying those skills and helping them be successful. Ed recently wrote a gray paper for Pilko and Associates titled, "It's a Leadership Thing, but You Already Know That." And it's because of that gray paper that we're here today on this video. We've had a lot of interest in understanding and some of the details behind Ed's gray paper. And so we thought it would be very helpful for our clients if we expanded our discussion around Ed's gray paper into this video. So Ed, thank you for taking the time today. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here. Great to see you again, as always.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. So let's get started. It's a leadership thing, but you already knew that. Why do you say it's a leadership thing? I don't quite get that. Tell us more.
Well, as you know, Greg, one of my roles was to travel around and visit locations all over the world for one of the companies I work for, and kind of be a troubleshooter to help solve problems at problem sites. And I'll tell you, of the 40-some locations I went to, every time I went, it always boiled down to being a leadership issue in the end. And if you think about it, we don't hire bad people at our sites, at least not all bad people. There'll be an occasional problem, but and people don't come to work to try to get hurt. That's not why they're here, or to try to keep us from meeting our goals. So we don't have that. And sometimes we hear, oh, that's just a bad location or a bad site, but you know, the culture at that site isn't all bad. And culture is a direct result of leadership behavior. So it's been said, and I agree with it, every leader gets the culture they deserve. And the kingdom really does reflect the king or the queen, as the case may be.
Okay, so you're talking about leadership behaviors and culture. I get that. I understand that. But what can a leader do to change? What does a leader need to do to think about changing either his behavior or his culture, or what comes first, chicken or the egg? Talk about that.
Yeah, great question. But let's lay a little foundation here at first, so we make sure we're talking the same terms. Culture is an overworked, overused word, and I like a really simple definition of the word culture, and that's simply the way we do things here. So every place has a culture. Every place has a way they do things. And we think about leadership behaviors. Again, I like to define that. You know, most of us think, oh, that must be what leaders do and say. Well, it is true, but it's also what leaders don't do and don't say that helps set the culture as well. So if we think about how culture gets set, it really starts with leadership behavior. Leadership behavior drives the climate, and climate is really just a snapshot at any one point in time of the culture. Well, and that climate helps set employee behaviors. So if you think about what a leader does, that has a huge influence on what employees do and their behavior. And over time, that employee behavior really sets the values in a workplace, which then determines the culture. So if you look at that chain, it really does all start with leadership behavior. So if you think about it, a simple example is, what kind of culture do you want to have? So if a leader or a company is preaching, we really want to be a company that has work-life balance, and yet that leader sends emails on the weekend, and those emails aren't critical. We all have critical things we have to do on the weekend, but just regular emails all weekend long, that leader behavior will set a culture eventually, because it'll impact employee behavior, which then will impact the culture. And then the culture will be one that says, hey, we have to work 24/7. That's our culture.
So let me just see if I get this right. If I'm the leader of an organization, when I'm at work, I'm on. I need to say the right thing, do the right thing, establish the right culture, the principles and the integrity and the ways in which I want to do things. But when I go home, I can be different, right? I can be a different person. But what you're saying is no, because all of those behaviors kind of add up to who my people read that I am, right? They can see that get a sense of, hey, that's what he really values.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that from being in leadership for years as well, that there is no off time for a leader. You're the folks that work, the people that work with you, they know what you do. They know when you leave. They know what car you drive to work. I mean, they're watching you all the time, and all that behavior, what you do and do not do, sets the culture. So if you preach safety at work and then you go get in your car and they see you not click your seatbelt on before you pull out of your parking space, you have done more to set the culture by what you didn't do there than all the words you gave, in the safety meeting that said, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt. So yes, what you do and do not do and what you say and do not say has a huge impact on the culture.
Got it. So let's say that I want to really turn a culture around. Let's say that I hear your message. I read your gray paper, and I want to start making a difference immediately. What are some of the things I need to do to start making those changes happen?
Yeah, the first thing is you have to understand where your culture is today. And the way you really do that is you ask. That's the greatest way to find out where you're at. You have to ask your employees. Now we've all been surveyed to death. I mean, you can't call a customer service line without getting a survey. And surveys have a place. Don't get me wrong, they do. There are companies that do a great job with surveying whole organizations to find out where their culture is. But I really favor a one-on-one approach. I've used this approach at several troubled sites. I've used it in places that weren't troubled. And when you sit down one-on-one with an employee, you just get a different answer. I've seen people sit in groups as well, and you get a kind of a group think at that point. You're either the strongest person in the room or the loudest, their voice comes through. But when it's one-on-one, when the person believes that you're going to treat their feedback confidentially and you're going to value it, you get a whole different answer. So I've done this at a couple sites. We'll come in with a small team. Before COVID, we would sit down personally one-on-one, and we would interview folks, go through some questions that help draw out what's going on in the workplace and get to some of those root issues on the culture. And it's really interesting. Last time I did this with 3 different folks who were doing interviews. We compare notes at the end of the day, and it's amazing how we're all hearing the same thing, right? Because we're getting through what's the true culture there. So that one-on-one, I find that even though it takes a little more time and time is money, right? I find that to be truly valuable. I do have a warning though, and my warning is don't start this process. Don't ask your employees these questions unless you want to hear their answers. You will do more damage to your culture by going through this, asking the questions, getting their feedback, and then if you do nothing with that feedback, you've gone backwards.
So you're saying you're better off I think I hear you clearly. If you're going to go, you need to launch. You can't, sit back and not do anything and take your time and whatever else. So that makes a lot of sense. Be
ready for the answers when they come. Absolutely. Have a plan in place before you start. How are you going to address what you hear? And you'll hear good things and you'll hear things you wish you didn't hear.
Well, I think, we're all human and we all understand that we have positives and negatives. There's things that I do well. There's things that I don't do as well as I should. Getting feedback on both, is that what you recommend? I mean, when we're talking about how do I change my behavior so that we can establish the right workforce here, sometimes it takes time and you need to be kind of self-aware along the process too, don't you?
Well, you sure do. Yeah, that's right, Greg. And you do need to hear both. You need to hear both the positives, the things that are going well, and you need to hear things that maybe aren't going quite so well and need a little more focus. And it's often interesting too. We often hear, many leaders don't intend to send a bad message or a message that is taken wrongly by their workforce, but that's how their workforce interpreted it. We've run into some recently where leaders, for all good intent, had given a strong message on safety that was received badly by the workforce, kind of created some fear in the workforce. And so, yes, I think it's important you ask not only what message you thought you sent, but the message that was received by the workforce. And that's where those one-on-one discussions are so valuable, because if somebody has some fear, they're not going to share that in a big room, but they will share it one-on-one over Zoom or Teams or in person if you can do that.
Right. Are there levels of the organization where this works more effectively? Or does it work at the bottom but not at the top, or the top and not the bottom? I mean, help me understand where you apply the leadership disciplines that you just talked about, or leadership change behaviors. Where's it most effective?
Yeah, I think it works at all levels, Greg. I mean, because you've got people who are being led at all levels. And I have sat down with people at various levels in the company. And again, I can't stress enough how much I favor that one-on-one approach. So just having that discussion, even at some of the higher levels, you'll find that people will share things behind closed doors that, boy, they just they're too maze bright to share in a big group. So you get to the true roots of that culture, and that's really the only way you can go about changing the culture, is to truly understand it.
So maybe a classic question here, Ed, that culture's got to change from the top down. Can it change from the bottom up?
I am a firm believer that leadership behavior is the biggest way to get the culture to change. That is the spark that changes it. But I got to tell you, I've been in an organization where the culture got set to a place where the employees liked it so much that it didn't really matter what leader came in. They were unwilling to let that leader take their culture backwards. So actually, the work team was the leader, and the new person who had the leader title, they were being impacted by the leader behaviors of that work team. They would tell that leader, this is the way we do it here. This is our culture. And frankly, if you don't like it, you can go work somewhere else, because we like it a lot and we get the results the company wants. So we know we're going to win.
Well, I would think that would be a wonderful day, though, if you had a work environment where the safety and the respect for each other and the culture was so strong that it didn't matter where you were coming from, whether you were coming from the C-suite or the board of directors or an outsider looking in. They see the same robust culture that's influencing people and decisions all across the matrix of that organization. That would be a great day. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
In
well,
your
I have. I've seen certain locations that have gone there. I've seen a company that you and I worked for that set some very strong cultural norms across the organization, across geographic boundaries, that were became really a part of the fabric of life of that company. So it was, yeah, I've seen it work. I've seen it work successfully.
So if I'm a leader and I want to buy into what you just said, what would you recommend? Where would I start?
Well, I think you really have to first look yourself in the mirror and ask, am I serious about this? This isn't necessarily a program of the month. You'll have a culture. You have a culture now. You'll have a culture when this is over. And are you willing to ask the hard questions? Are you willing to hear what your employees have to say about where your culture is? And then are you willing to make the changes that are needed based on the feedback? So I would start with finding out how you can have those one-on-one discussions with a good percentage of your employees to see where you're really at. Certainly that's something we do here at Pilko. It can be done in-house if you have the right people and the right trust. If trust is broken in your company, then you need to get somebody from the outside or from a different location to come in and have those discussions for sure.
Excellent. Ed, I appreciate your time today. I mean, I think you've covered most of the points or all of the points in your gray paper. Any final thoughts that you have that maybe I haven't asked about?
Yeah, I do want to throw one other warning out there, and it's another big mistake I've seen with companies is when you get this feedback, employees have an expectation now that the company's going to do something with it. So if you're successful, employees have kind of poured their heart out to these one-on-one sessions, and it's here's my big issue, and often companies overthink the solution step, and rather than getting after a solution quickly, they want to get 100% answer put in place. They wanted all the boilerplate in place before they roll something out. So that may take months, if not quarter after quarter, and the employee sees nothing has changed. So probably the biggest thing that I've seen to make this a success, I went to one smaller site. We found some issues right away with work-life balance and how overtime was managed. And that leader was astute enough to change things the week we were there. So that leader heard what we said, took it to heart, and she immediately said, well, we're going to stop that. We're going to give our employees a much longer notice before they have to work overtime. And immediately that helped set the culture on the right path. The employees felt like their feedback was heard. They felt like their leader cared about them. And they felt like, if that can change, what else can change? So I would encourage you, look for some of that, I hate to use the word low-hanging fruit, but that's a great way to describe it. That's something that's ready to be picked and can be easily changed, and show your employees, we heard you, and we're willing to make changes here.
So real momentum. I mean, if you really have the opportunity to jumpstart by listening and taking action where you can, communicating back and making sure people understand, hey, I heard you. I believe we can make a difference here. I'm sure honesty and integrity, if I can't change some of that, look, I can't change that, but what about let's work on this over here? Let's open a dialogue about it, try to stay on the same page. I would assume all of those tools would work in a situation like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Your employees are pretty sharp. They understand the markets. They understand companies don't have unlimited budgets. They understand those kinds of things. And even in some interviews I'm currently involved in, when you talk to the employees, they understand that kind of thing. They know they're not, they have business savvy. A lot of these folks are small business owners on the outside. They're really smart, and they understand all the constraints that business leaders, not all maybe, but a lot of the constraints that business leaders are under. So yeah, be honest with them. Tell them what you can change. Tell them what you can't change, and they'll value you for asking. They'll value you for making the steps you can make.
So it's a leadership thing, and you already knew that, didn't you? I mean, thank you, Ed. I think you've covered a lot of ground today. At Pilko and Associates, Ed Rule is one of our lead advisors, and we have many lead advisors have the wealth of experience and years of experience, decades of experience, just like Ed. If you need help in an area like that, in a leadership or cultural assessment type of environment, operational safety, EH&S issues, give us a call. I could say this with almost 100% certainty, but we've been there and we've done that. So if there's anything we can help you with, feel free to reach out. You can email me at cochran@pilko.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Ed, thank you. Appreciate your time today, and we really appreciate the gray paper. We want to thank our watchers, and if there are any questions that you have as a result of this discussion or other operational EH&S related issues that you'd like to talk about, feel free to reach out to Pilko and Associates. We're here, and we'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.